Salam sejahtera and welcome to ASEAN Today. I'm Raymond Goh of Malaysia's TV3 in Kuala Lumpur.
Selamat berjumpa lagi. I'm Raissa Chentami of the Indonesia channel in Jakarta, and this is your monthly look at the dynamic Southeast Asia region. ASEAN leaders joined other global heads at the United Nations General Assembly in New York, sharing input on crisis, including pandemic recovery and climate change. The 77th session of the UN General Assembly convened from September 13 to the 26th. More than 150 leaders attended, the first in-person meeting since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. The UN chief warned that the world is in great peril, saying that leaders must tackle conflicts and climate catastrophes, increasing poverty and inequality, and address divisions among major powers that have gotten worse since the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
Addressing common challenges will require continued solidarity as we demonstrate the great promise and potential of this organization. The United Nations is the home of cooperation, and the General Assembly is the life within that home.
We'll hear from leaders shortly in our Hot Seat segment. Here in Indonesia, thousands of protesters flooded the streets in anger over a rise in gas prices. Students and workers rallied across the country on September 6th to protest a sharp increase in fuel prices. Subsidized gas jumped from 51 cents to 67 cents per liter, and diesel from 35 cents to 46 cents, the first increase in 8 years. President Joko Widodo cut fuel subsidies to ease a multi-billion-dollar budget overrun. Protesters in Jakarta tore down police barricades and clashed with security personnel, while demonstrators in Palembang met with tear gas and water cannons. In Tasikmalaya, protesters managed to force their way into the parliament building after violently clashing with police.
Government helicopters attacked a school in Myanmar, killing more than a dozen people, including 7 children. At least 17 others were hurt when army helicopters shot at a school in Ledyet-Kone. The military said it opened fire because rebels were using the building to attack its forces. The UN has documented 260 attacks on schools and education personnel since the military ousted the elected government of Aung San Suu Kyi in February last year. This was the highest number of children killed. The country's deposed leader and her former advisor, Australian Sean Turnell, was sentenced on September 29th to 3 years in prison for violating the country's official State Secrets Act. Australia immediately rejected the ruling and demanded the release of Turnell. 3 members of her cabinet were also found guilty, each receiving sentences of 3 years. Suu Kyi had already been sentenced to 20 years imprisonment on 11 other counts, with several charges remaining. If convicted on all charges, she could face nearly 200 years in prison. She has denied all allegations against her. Here in Malaysia, a court found the wife of former Prime Minister Najib Razak guilty in a corruption trial. The verdict on September 1st came just a week after Najib began serving a 12-year prison sentence over a case linked to the 1MDB state fund. Wife Rosmah Mansor was charged with 3 counts of bribery in connection with a $279 million project to provide solar power to schools in rural Sarawak.
At least 32 people were killed and dozens more hurt in a fire at a 3-story karaoke bar in southern Vietnam. The disaster prompted Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh to order fire inspections nationwide at establishments considered to be at high risk. 32 people were killed and 17 others hurt, making it the deadliest fire in Vietnam in 20 years. Bar owner Lee An Xuan was arrested and faces criminal charges related to breaching fire prevention regulations. He will be held in custody for 4 months while the investigation continues. 7 people were killed and 5 others hurt in Indonesia's West Kalimantan province after a landslide at an illegal gold mine buried an estimated 20 people. The victims were mining gold on a bare hillside when the landslide triggered by heavy rains struck the area on September 17th. Police said they identified 4 of the recovered bodies, and the search for other victims continues with help from locals and families. Unlicensed mines are common across Indonesia, where abandoned sites attract locals who scrounge for leftover gold ore without using proper safety equipment.
Southeast Asia is beginning to recover after more than 2 years of a global shutdown. As ASEAN Today's Karina Tasha reports, the coronavirus pandemic served as a wake-up call to businesses here in Malaysia.
Revenues took a big hit over the past 2 years, and many businesses in Malaysia are welcoming a strong pickup in sales after the country's borders reopened on April 1st. Rex KL was a long-defunct Kuala Lumpur cinema that reopened in 2019 as a community and cultural hub offering food, retail, arts and event space. Then only months after its rebirth, the pandemic had repeated lockdowns hit.
Thank God, we managed to survive. And by somewhere around May and June, we see almost full recovery, almost. Yeah. And July, when the border opened up, we see some tourists coming back to Malaysia. Then we see a very good increase, dramatically.
In 2021, the economic recovery of the region lagged behind much of the world. Countries in Southeast Asia were conservative about reopening their economies and even more so, their borders. Most of them only tentatively began allowing quarantine-free travel starting at the end of the first quarter of this year. But the effect was immediate as the region's economies have taken off since the travel ban lifted.
We are fairly hopeful that the ASEAN countries will have a higher, much higher growth this year compared to the rest of the world.
Regional economic growth was largely driven by demand for regional exports last year. This is no longer the case.
The ASEAN countries are looking at resumption of domestic growth powered by domestic consumption, which are driven largely by recovery in domestic demand, especially in the hotels, restaurant and tourism-related sectors. Investment is also picking up on the back of increased FDI flows into the region as a result of a more positive outlook for the coming years.
Yeah, experts regional growth to average at least 5% this year, but worries such as rising inflation, a possible slowdown in global demand, and geopolitical tensions remain. Still, the outlook is a lot brighter than any time since the pandemic struck.
Of course, it's very difficult, but what we're looking is we're looking in the future.
Malaysia's full-year economic performance expanded 3.1% in 2021, rebounding from a 5.6% drop in 2020. It was the country's worst annual performance since the 1998 Asian financial crisis. The country's economic recovery is expected to continue in line with improved global and domestic demand. Karina Tasha for ASEAN Today.
More ASEAN Today is coming up shortly.
Global leaders meet to address the world's pressing issues. That's next.
Saya ingin mengumumkan kerjasama dengan The Indonesia Channel. Saya mendorong semua entitas untuk bergabung dalam upaya ini dengan mempromosikan produk dan layanan mereka di platform digital yang unik ini.
I love Indonesia. I love the food. Yummy. Wow. I'm gonna hunt 4 ingredients. Now I'm ready to cook. Let's go to the kitchen. It's done. Let's meet to eat.
Foodiepedia on the Indonesia Channel.
I'm Trần Minh Ngân of VCCTV Net Việt in Hanoi.
I'm Thairat Thomya of Thailand's Thairat TV in Bangkok.
I'm Monica Sambodet from the National Television of Cambodia in Phnom Penh.
I'm Raymond Goh of Malaysia's TV3 in Kuala Lumpur.
I'm Glenda Chong of Singapore's Channel News Asia.
I'm Raissa Chentami of the Indonesia channel at the ASEAN Secretariat in Jakarta. This is your weekly look into the dynamic Southeast Asia region.
ASEAN Today on the Indonesia channel.
The Best of Bali takes viewers on a special guided tour to the treasures of the island of the gods.
The romantic dinner is beautiful.
The Best of Bali, only on the Indonesia channel.
You're watching ASEAN Today. I'm Raymond Goh in Kuala Lumpur.
And I'm Raissa Chentami in Jakarta. The United Nations General Assembly met in person for the first time since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. The meeting came at a time of immense global challenges, including the war in Ukraine, economic hardships, and concerns about climate change. Southeast Asia's leaders took their turns at the podium.
In the last year, our world has experienced great upheaval. A growing crisis in food insecurity, record heat, floods and droughts, COVID-19, inflation, and a brutal, needless war. I reject the use of violence and war to conquer nations or expand borders through bloodshed, to stand against global politics of fear and coercion, to defend the sovereign rights of smaller nations as equal to those of larger ones, to embrace basic principles like freedom of navigation, respect for international law, and arms control. No matter what else we may disagree on, that is the common ground upon which we must stand.
发展是破解各种难题，实现人民幸福的关键。我们要坚持把发展置于国际议程的中心位置。 凝聚促进发展的国际共识，维护各国正当发展权利，培育全球发展新动能，构建全球发展伙伴关系，让发展成果更多、更公平地惠及每一个国家、每一个人。
Of these, I see 4 challenges to the continued survival of our global community. First is climate change. The time for talk about if and when has long since passed. It is here. It is now. Climate change is the greatest threat affecting our nations and our peoples. There is no other problem so global in nature that it requires a united effort, one led by the United Nations. The effects of climate change are uneven and reflect an historical injustice. Those who are least responsible suffer the most. The development of advanced technologies is rapidly transforming human life and experience. We still barely understand how these transformations are unfolding and where they are leading. The imminent diffusion of these emerging technologies could solve many of our old problems, but they could also disrupt our political and social orders. Our governance structures must keep up. Third, widening geopolitical polarities and sharpening strategic competitions are transforming the international political landscape. A profound lack of trust is putting enormous strains on our multilateral system. Our very charter is being violated around the world as we speak. In Asia, our hard-won peace and stability is under threat by increasing strategic and ideological tensions. Therein lies our fourth transcendent challenge. This injustice was evident during the pandemic, when the richer nations immediately received vaccines at the expense of the have-nots. We see, for example, the dangers of this lurking in the persistent digital divide and in ballooning debt burdens.
The policies and decisions of some countries can affect other nations, For example, in tackling inflation that the world is suffering from, the monetary policy and determining of interest rates by one country also has an impact on other countries. This is where cooperation and coordination among countries need to be stepped up so as to achieve the goal of a more just economic well-being for all. In an international financial and monetary structure that is still dominated by a few major powers, as well as during the world economic recovery, domestic monetary decisions have to be adjusted by considering the reality and needs of developing countries. In this connection, Malaysia urges the UN member states to establish an international monetary cooperation mechanism to build a more effective and just system that is able to balance the needs of global development.
The COVID-19 pandemic has only exacerbated the inequality gaps. It has reversed at least 4 years of development gains, according to the UNDP, and at a time when the world is trying to recover from the 2 years of pandemic, our problems are compounded with multiple challenges. We are seeing new conflicts on top of global geopolitical tensions. We are experiencing the food crisis, the energy crisis, and the financing crisis. These have had the most detrimental impact on those who are most vulnerable, that is LDC and the small island development states, the SIDS, and vulnerable groups such as women, girls, the elderly, and people with disability. Collective action is certainly needed now. Mr. President, the food crisis has affected us all. This global food insecurity stems from the conflicts, climate change disruption, to supply chain and uneven recovery from the COVID-19. There is thus an urgent need to strengthen multilateral action among like-minded partners, United Nations agencies, WTO, and international institutions in facilitating a constructive dialogue and improving policy coordination to address this crisis. It is certainly vital to keep our global supply chains open for seamless cross-border flows of food, fertilizer, and essential goods, while also making our food system more resilient so that equitable access to safe and healthy food for all can be guaranteed.
The General Assembly came as the war in Ukraine approaches its 7th month. That conflict has become the largest war in Europe since World War II, with thousands killed and millions forced to leave their homes. More ASEAN Today is coming up shortly.
They are not kung fu pandas, but still a big attraction. These visitors will get an extended stay in Singapore. Details next.
Produk lokal memang handal, kreasi lokal memang spesial. Ayo beli buatan negeri, bangga sekali
and welcome to Yoga Bliss. Exhale, reaching down to triangle pose.
Roll your knee out and up to the sky. Breathing here.
Yoga Bliss, only on the Indonesia Channel.
You are watching iPop Playlist.
iPop on the Indonesia Channel.
This is ASEAN Today.
And we are coming to you this week from Jakarta and Kuala Lumpur. Cambodian Americans in California came together at a traditional night market showcasing Khmer culture and recovery from past trauma inflicted by the Khmer Rouge. VOA's Jenny Abdullah takes us there.
Danny Kim has a rickshaw, like the one he says his father used to run before the Khmer Rouge took power in Cambodia in 1975. During the atrocities that followed, Kim's uncle was executed and his family was sent to an internment camp. He was 11 when he came to the United States as a refugee. More than 25 years had passed before he visited his homeland, a trip that inspired him to start a traditional Cambodian night market in Fresno.
I didn't get a chance to experience it when I was growing up. It was in the middle of the war, atrocity, the genocide. So this is opportunity for me to somewhat start some healing process and maybe catching up to my roots.
The night market showcases traditional songs, dancing and food, including sun-dried clams and numon sorm with pork and yellow beans wrapped in sticky rice. Mzomis, who was born in the United States, says it is a special place for himself and his parents, who also fled the Khmer Rouge.
I've never been to Cambodia. The food here will connect me to my root that my culture taught my parent. My parent came here and teach us. So it just make me enjoy our culture more.
Soma Norodom is another regular at the night market. A princess from the Cambodian royal house of Norodom, which was targeted by the Khmer Rouge, says the market is a place for healing.
My father, his friends, that first generation, they don't talk about it. They keep it hidden, and a lot of them have PTSD. And PTSD has also continued on to the younger generation. You have to heal first. So the first generation is not healed, we're the second generation. And we have to learn. We have to learn about our history. We have to learn about what happened.
Jenny Abdullah for VOA News, Fresno, California.
Here are several events on the ASEAN calendar. The Rap Boa Festival will take place on October 9th in Samut Prakan, Thailand. English singer Callum Scott will hit the stage on October 27th in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And Canadian pop sensation Justin Bieber is making his way back to Manila as part of his Justice World Tour on October 29th. No trip to Singapore's Mandai Wildlife Reserve is complete without a visit to the panda family at River Wonders. The stars of the giant panda forest exhibit are Kai Kai, Jia Jia and their son Lei Lei. As ASEAN Today's Aisha Nadira reports, their stays have now been extended.
Visitors to River Wonders will be able to see giant pandas Jia Jia and Kai Kai for 5 more years until 2027. The Mandai Wildlife Group that operates River Wonders signed a deal with China on September 2nd to extend the 10-year loan of the pandas. The signing was witnessed by Singapore's Minister of State for Trade and Industry Low Yen Ling and Chinese ambassador to Singapore Sun Haiyan. According to the agreement, the cooperation will focus on giant panda conservation research and the well-being of captive pandas. Tourists flock to the zoo to welcome the good news and to celebrate Kaikai's 15th birthday and Jeje's recent 14th birthday.
I think it's good that we get to see the panda.
The pair gave birth to a cub, Lele, on August 14th last year after many attempts to conceive. Kaikai and Jeje were sent to Singapore in 2012, 3 years after the agreement on cooperative research on giant pandas was signed. That commemorated the 20th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between China and Singapore. Aisha Nadira for ASEAN Today.
We like hearing from you throughout the ASEAN region and the world. All of our episodes are posted on YouTube, so check us out there if you can't find us on your local TV channel. Then let us know what you're thinking or what you want to see on the program. Email us at ASEANTodayTV@gmail.com, post something on our Facebook page, or tweet us at ASEANTodayTV. The Mid-Autumn Festival is observed by millions of people across the world. Activities include moon gazing and the display of festive lanterns. The Chinatown community in Singapore held fairs, art performances, lantern displays, and lion dances. Colorful lanterns also illuminated the gardens by the bay at night with various designs of mooncakes, jade rabbits, Chinese zodiac animals, and global cultural attractions.
我们最喜欢的是门口的那一组带凤凰的灯，特别的漂亮，最有节日的氛围。
In Thailand and elsewhere, mooncakes are also part of the celebration held this year on September 10th. And that's ASEAN Today for this week. I'm Raissa Chentami of the Indonesia channel in Jakarta.
And I'm Raymond Goh of Malaysia's TV3 in Kuala Lumpur. Thank you for watching, and please join us again next time for ASEAN Today.